All right, I'm live at the Red House with my friend Caleb Caudle, and thank you for making time to stop in.
Absolutely.
We've had the fortune to actually get to hang out a lot over the last year or two here at the house and at your place, and it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's good to be here in North Carolina and enjoy these seasons. And yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. First thing I want to ask you, that I hope you don't mind me sharing about just our personal relationship, but one thing I genuinely want people to know about you as a person is just when I was feeling very low about music and stuff, I I reached out to three people to kind of get some advice and pull me back into sanity and back into feeling like things were worthwhile. And if you don't mind me sharing, you were of those three people, you were the most gracious in being willing to reach out to me and be like, let's talk about this in great detail and sort this out and make you feel better again. And that, I don't know, it just made me really feel like, one, you really care about music and other people doing music and what that means, but also that you're just uh, I don't know, we're two dudes from the same place, and there's sometimes you think that people are going to feel competitive with you or something, but with you it was like, I want you to succeed. And I guess that made me wonder about you, aside from the fact that you're just a genuinely good dude, why why do you care about other people also feeling being in touch with this thing that's worthwhile?
Well, that's just it. I think it is worthwhile. I think that for me, it's just important that art is being made in this world, and I think it makes it a better place. And so, yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, I gotta give credit to people like, Elizabeth Cook or John Paul White. These people that I have in my life that I can go to. And they've always talked me off the ledge, and I'm just trying to pay it forward, honestly. So, I mean, I think I've just had some good teachers, and and so, it's really easy for me to talk somebody else through that, because it's so frustrating. I mean, it can be so frustrating, and you can feel like, you just keep pushing that rock up the hill and nothing's happening. But, I think as long as you're focused on the art and you're in the music, or whatever medium you choose, I think you can keep going forward. And sometimes you just gotta, you just gotta fight through it.
Yeah, it seems like especially these days it actually does require some fight, the odds are against the odds are against the arts in a lot of ways. And
Yeah, they are.
thank you though for doing that. Thank you
Oh,
for sincerely for helping me out in that way, because it really kind of brought me back to life partially in some ways. So I
oh,
just appreciate the shit out of it.
cheers.
Cheers to you, sir. So with that being said, you are probably somebody who, I mean, I can't. I know that tons of people from our music community of the Winston-Salem area, they've got their own stories of success and being on different paths and stuff. But you are kind of killing it in a lot of ways. You're doing stuff that, I mean, where you've been recording and who you've been recording with, you've worked your ass off on this stuff. And I guess, I don't know, man. I was there the night that you played, I guess, your launch show at the garage when you were about to go off and start touring nationally.
Right.
And then you were back and you were at a whole different scale. And I guess, what do you think is some of the big takeaways of the experience of leaving Winston and then jumping in as deeply as you have to get into where you are now? I guess that's a really broad way to ask that, but I wonder if we could do a quick retrospect of just the last few years for you.
Well, I think that, the leaving part was, initially you're really excited about that. And I think a lot of the changes that have come to me through touring, not a lot of it has to do with music. And I think most of it has to do with just the travel aspect, and just, meeting people who aren't like me, or, they had a different background than I did or whatever. And it's just kind of seeing the similarities between, all walks of life, basically. I mean, like that's been like the really eye-opening thing for me. Just just seeing, everybody's going through it and like struggling and having their successes, and so yeah, it's just eye-opening to me, just the different things that I've seen and the different people I've met, and I've just tried to soak it all in, and it's just taught me a lot of lessons.
I'm sure that in many ways it all boils back down to like the music you create, and I know that that's what you care about the most is the music you create. But do you think that that act of leaving, that act of like really committing yourself to being on the road and being in the position where you could meet all those people, do you think that's been huge? Like, I guess, is that what you're kind of getting at? Is that been hugely important to the path that you've been on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fundamentally changed who I am, as a person, and it's changed my probably my morals and my values a lot. And so, yeah, I mean, it was like the best thing that could have happened for me. Also, really scary and maybe half dumb to just sell it all and pack it up into a car and go. But it doesn't look like how maybe I thought that it would look, but I've learned so much that it's all been worth it so far.
Yeah. Yeah, for a lot of artists that I think you're somebody that local artists probably could look at and learn some things from, honestly, especially about just how intentional you've been about treating this like something that you mean to do with your life, and
Yeah.
I think that's the part that I want to reiterate is because I do know that there's a handful of people who listen to this show that are, navigating that territory of how they pursue music as a thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that being on the road is important to that effort?
Well, for me, it's like I know that I was born and put here on this earth to write songs, and that's just like my true passion and my love. So I'm just constantly trying to get better in that, and I think I viewed touring as like a vehicle to continue writing songs at a high level, and it allowed me to, as hard as touring can be sometimes, and as as long as the drives can be, it really did allow me to focus more of my time on the art that I was making and sharing with others. So I viewed it as just necessary, like it was a thing that, like exercise or whatever,
Yeah.
It's like this thing that's just felt non-negotiable for me, in the way that I know what I want to do long term, which is what I'm already doing, just on maybe a bigger scale. And so I think just throwing myself all the way into it was like pretty eye-opening. And it allowed things to kind of progress a little bit quicker than if I had just only been able to give half my time to it or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I have 1,000 questions that we could point at with the road.
Let's go.
I don't know whether to start with that or whether to start with, well, let's work our way up to the other stuff. So,
Okay.
You started, I guess, traveling around North America,
Yeah.
and I think you've played almost every state in the country, right?
Yeah. Probably. I mean, I would say over 40 states I've played in. I'm missing 3 states that I haven't been to, but I don't know that I've played shows. I'm trying to think. Like, I'm sure there's some states that were just drive-through states, but maybe not many though, because I have put the miles on and played shows pretty much everywhere. Yeah, I haven't played in North Dakota, Alaska, or Hawaii, so those are the 3 I'm missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start going overseas?
Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, something like that. And I've done. We did the UK, and we did Sweden and Norway and Denmark over in Scandinavia, and we were scheduled to play all those places again in 2020, as well as like I was going to do Netherlands for the first time, and Germany and Switzerland and Spain, but that all got canceled, obviously because of COVID. But there's plans to return there, and so we're just kind of figuring that out right now and trying to see when would be best.
Yeah. So what was the first experience overseas like? How yeah, you want to describe that?
Sure. My first show was in a place about an hour outside of London called Bedford, and it was a crazy day before because I was on tour on the West Coast, and I had to go from Napa to Reno, Nevada, to play a show, and then after the show in Reno, I drove straight to the airport with Lauren. We were together, and we stayed in Reno airport overnight, and then we flew from Reno to Dallas, Dallas to Nashville, and then we flew from Nashville up to Toronto, Toronto to London, and then we took a train out to Bedford. And I remember taking the train, spilling coffee all over my hand, and just being like, I'd been awake for so long at that point. I slept a few hours in the Toronto airport, but we got to Bedford, and I tried to stay up to the end of the night to, relieve myself of the jet lag that was going to follow the following day. And so I was like, yeah, I'll stay up till like 10, and then I'll sleep in or whatever. And I made it to like 6:30 in the evening, and I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, I looked at my phone and it said 3:30, and I thought it was 3:30 in the morning. And I walked out of the bedroom, and it was light outside. And the person, my friend Danny, we were staying with, I asked her, like, is my phone like not reset or something? And she's like, no, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. And I was like, don't we have to load in like 3 hours? And so it was really weird, because I was like running off fumes, and I was alarmed at how quiet the audience was. Like in the States, you kind of expect some chatter or beer bottles getting clanked around in a trash can somewhere, but I just remember playing my first song, and like it was just dead silent, and then they just erupt at the end, and kind of gave me the chills, honestly, because I was just half awake, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I was there, and I couldn't believe that people were there to see it, and it was just a really great experience. And that's been kind of a similar experience for all of Scandinavia as well. And so I just really enjoy playing overseas. They're just very kind and very respectful.
Does that feel like a huge deal when you're wrapping your head around getting to play in different countries, where maybe English might not even be the first or like deepest cultural language, like totally different culture? What does that feel like?
Like kind of normal, like, I mean, it's like, it feels normal because it's something that I've just always known that I wanted to do. And so I guess it feels like, a goal that's been achieved. But yeah, I mean, really cool, like really fun, and it feels good. And it's kind of strange to be so far from home and people know the words to your songs. And so it's like, I don't know, you feel like something's working. And so I guess, that's a little surprising because it doesn't always feel in this business like something's working. So yeah. It's really nice to feel like it's like, they heard about this show, they looked up the music, they learned the songs, or they were existing fans or whatever it was. And like, just to feel like that connection's being made is like the whole reason I'm like even interested in writing songs to begin with, just for that connection. And so, yeah, it feels good.
I mean, I guess it must. Like, I see little examples of that in the Southeast, and that's really where the most of my touring reach has been, in the Southeast. And I know what it feels like to go to Virginia or to Tennessee, but those places feel like they're just kind of almost like an extension of North Carolina in different ways. They're a little different,
Yeah.
You can feel a little of the difference, but the people generally are the same. And I just, I just wonder what it feels like and looks like to go to a place where the culture actually is legitimately different, and like it feels like a world apart in some kind of way.
Yeah.
I think that sounds awesome though, that like you were able to, like you told me about it before, but I guess the impression I had, and the impression I get sometimes from people, is like that there's just there's an appreciation for live events and music and stuff that might be different, but it sounds like they actually prepared beforehand. Like they're like certain people out there actually got to know your material as you were about to come out and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I'd had a pretty good amount of press coverage on the previous 2 records that I had put out before I went over there, especially in Scandinavia. Well, and then also on, before I went to England, they were playing some songs on the BBC, and I'd gotten some press coverage there. So I think there was a little bit of anticipation there, whereas maybe if I had gone 5 years prior, there wouldn't have been. So like, I am kind of glad that it took until like the timing felt right. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to like going back and building on top of what we had already done over there.
You kind of like built, yeah. So, well, maybe as a principle, I mean, like, that's also a question about touring too, how touring works in the U.S. too, like whether you try to sort of build an audience through press coverage or whatever, whether you try to build an audience in cities before you go to them versus going to cities and kind of doing the old-fashioned playing in a free bar and then building your audience up, more and more. What do you think is obviously there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but...
Right, because both of those things you just described, I've done both of those things. So
yeah,
I don't know what works, and it's still kind of like a mystery, But I think just putting yourself out there and like just trying, I think it's like a big part of it,
Yeah.
Because I think so many people like they'll go play New York one time and no one shows up and they're like, well, I guess I just can't do it in New York or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it took me 15 shows playing in New York. I went and played to no one 15 times in a row. And then on the 16th time, it was like I had a crowd there. And I just think that, just the persistence of it all is just like a really important piece of this whole puzzle. Maybe the most important piece. And like, press coverage is awesome. It's great. I'm not sure it sells tickets or even records, but I do think that it's important to have, a general awareness about you, or, if you're coming to a city cold, it's like trying to, partner with the local record store or a local radio station, try to do an interview, something just so it's like, you're trying to infiltrate that market in a meaningful way rather than just like showing up and being like, hey, sound guy, you ready to hear some really sad songs?
Yeah.
I'll ruin your night.
Yeah, man. But playing 15 shows, like something, I don't know if other people are running into this now or not, or if this is a new phenomenon or what, but I feel like it's harder nowadays to go to a place and play 15 shows to nobody than it used to be. And at least right now, I think I get, I don't know whether to think about it from this angle or not, but whatever. Whether it's just me and whether it's just how my booking efforts are going right now, or whether it's something more specific to the way that social media sort of tries to indicate whether or not we're popular or famous or whatever. But I'm noticing a lot more folks in good venues, somewhat better venues, being a lot more particular about like how many tickets are you selling, and like it's a lot more strategic, I guess. And sometimes it's hard to find the appropriate space to go play those 15 shows where you use that space to try to build that audience,
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Like obviously I didn't go play the same venue 15 times in a row. I played this place and that place. I played Arlene's Grocery, and then I played some piano bar. I played Jalopy Theater. I played, it's like you go to all these places. Pete's, I think it's Pete's Candy Shop or Pete's Candy Store or something like that. I played a bunch of places in New York before I had had any sort of like a successful show. And, obviously New York's a weird example because of the amount of venues they have that you can kind of like, try out different situations and see if they work. Whereas like a town like Winston, we have like the Ramcat, and we have the Ramcat,
Yeah.
And like, obviously we used to have more venues than that, but, it's an interesting thing trying to build it. And I think the more venues that are in a place, it's like, I always look at it, if I'm going into a new town, like say I'm going into Minneapolis or something, it's like, even if the show's terrible, I just need to meet 1 or 2 people at the show who have like the insight to like, hey, this is where you should be playing, or this is who you should be doing in store at this record shop. This is the cool record shop, or this is a DJ at the radio station that deals in roots music. You should talk to them. So it's like I always view that first, or even first or second, or even third time visiting a city. I'm like trying to gather intel about that city. I want to know like, there's people, I know there's people in New York that are going to like what I do. And it's like, that's a fact in my mind. And then, so it's like, you're just trying to connect with those people. And, like I said, you're just gathering information every time you're going to a city.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I view it. And so you just kind of eat your losses and hope for a better day, and just know that you're going to be back and armed with, better information and better opportunities next time.
Yeah, everything you're saying is exactly what I always notice when you and I talk about this stuff. Is just like you have so much more of a intentional and like sort of, like a way of thinking about this whole thing of what it means to be a working artist and like kind of an entrepreneur within the arts that actually, is thought through and is like really intentional and really strategic about what it is that you're trying to do and how you're trying to build support for what you're trying to do. Because I feel like, especially when you're younger, or I don't know, the easiest thing to do is just be like, screw it, I do this for fun or something, and like I do this for the love of the art, and I don't want to do all the nitty gritty stuff. I don't want to do all the administrative and all the strategic stuff that's going to make it to where I can do this my whole life or something like that.
Yeah.
When did you develop that?
Well, I just don't want to do anything else. So, I try, it's like you go and fail, and it's like, I don't know that it's ever something where I feel like I've arrived at this, conclusion. I think it's something where I view it kind of more as like a lifelong process of just kind of like, just getting sharper over time and knowing what works and what doesn't, and just trying to like, especially now, just trying to cut through the noise of it all. There's a bunch of people with a bunch of different opinions, but I truly believe that each artist's career is different. And, it's like, I think something, that my mentors have told me would be like, I think Elizabeth Cook maybe told me one time that, she could hand me over her contacts, all of them, and it doesn't really mean anything because it's all about the relationships you're building. And so, I could go meet someone, but really if I don't invest time with a person or, with a relationship, or it's like kind of, it's going to be fruitless. And I think that's true across the board in life. So I always try to view the folks that I work with in all the different cities that I work with, the promoters, like I view them as like a piece of my life that I want to continue that relationship with them. And so I think it's always really important to, check in on them, like I check in on like everybody.
Yeah.
I check in on people all over the world because it's like whether they know it or not, they're part of my journey as an artist. And like, that might seem really normal to them. It's just part of their job. But like, I think that it's, those folks don't get enough credit for the important role that they're playing in the bigger scheme of like helping artists rise.
Yeah. Man, that's very real. Eddie Garcia and I kind of touched on something about that when I talked to him recently for the podcast. And also, I recently got to interview like the chair of the board at UNCSA, the board of the screenwriting program or something like that. I can't remember his exact title, but a really experienced like actor and film producer and all this stuff. And that was like the biggest takeaway I took from my talk with him was he just emphasized how much, from a consumer side especially, people kind of look at the arts as almost this symbolic, non-human realm where these stars exist and where these rich people exist and different stuff like that. But that at the end of the day, like these are human beings that are accomplishing these things, that are like waking up with problems and waking up with stress and still giving into their creativity or their desire to make some kind of piece of art come to fruition, and how that can somehow get lost with the presentation of this whole thing. But behind all that, behind the what looks like this idealistic presentation is just human beings being human beings and trying to accomplish things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's easy to forget about that, because we're all running our little races and we're, trying to figure it all out. And but all the people that you're interacting with along the way, they're also, super busy. They probably have kids. They probably didn't get a good night's sleep. They probably only had one cup of coffee, and it's like, I think just keeping in mind that like it's way bigger than just me and my songs. It's a big vast network of humans, and they're all going through their own struggles and also their own like opportunities. And so it's you're just trying to fit into that and just kind of like be like water, like just to constantly adapt. And I think that's just a lifelong process, is like that adaptability. I feel like that is, yeah, persistence is one side of it, adaptability is another side of it. And yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think this is a good point to like shift to this other part of the conversation that's most obvious for us to talk about. You just got done working on an album with some legendary folks in a legendary kind of place, and maybe you should be the one to like kind of contextualize that and talk about what you've been up to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I had made the record Better Hurry Up at Cash Cabin, and that was my last release. And so I had met John Carter Cash through that, just working there. And so he had mentioned that if I ever wanted to write a song with him or anything like that, just let him know. And so we scheduled a co-write, and we ended up writing a song called The Gates, and it's going to be on the record that I'm working on, or that I'm finished with. And he just, mentioned like, hey, I could produce a record on you if that's something you're interested in. And so I took him a whole notebook full of songs and just kind of played him through everything. And he just took notes, and we just kind of started talking about what we wanted to do. And the rhythm section that I had used on Better Hurry Up, Fred Eltringham on the drums and Dennis Crouch on the upright bass, I knew I wanted them to be a part of what I was about to do, just because they're the best. And so I knew that I wanted to be a full band, but I wanted it to kind of showcase the songs maybe in a different way than I had previously. And so John suggested Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush, and I didn't know that was a possibility. And then within 5 minutes, he had texted them and they were in. And so I feel real lucky that I could work with them, and they're just the best and like very easy to make music with. And it feels like a musical conversation's happening when you're in the room with that caliber of player. And, it probably did like put some pressure on me to rehearse really hard, because I was the only guitar on the record. And so, when you're going in and you're playing with those guys, you don't want to be the weak link. And so, I think after we cut the first song, I think Jerry Douglas was just like, well, I'd listen to that. And it made me feel good and at ease, and just like my job was bring good songs, and their job is they want to play on good songs. And so I knew that if I could do that, they'd be happy. And it really worked out. And so, yeah, just great experience.
Yeah, I feel like that's got to be an interesting experience too, because like we were just talking about, they're just humans that have accomplished a lot and that are like really good at what they do. But it's kind of, for me, hard to wrap my head around separating them from what all they've accomplished, what all they've participated in, and just like the gravity that exists around their names.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, while obviously you get to know these guys and you just see that they're just human beings in skin, is that still a weird pressure in the creative process that you feel like, like you're working with these dudes? Was that I guess to be super clear about the question, was it intimidating to work with people that are as well known as them?
Well, I think that if I wasn't so close to the project, like if I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking like in pure terms of like, would it be intimidating to go play music with them? it sounds intimidating, like when I hear it out loud. But then just knowing that, like, I'm no less dedicated to my craft as they are to theirs. They just have, 40 years on me or whatever it is, 30 years on me. And I think knowing that, it gives you the confidence to not be intimidated by them. And honestly, it's like I feel like I just hired the right people, and I just told them to just do their thing, like I wasn't giving any direction to them, and they knew exactly what to do. It was never, um, there was never any like, well, what do we do here kind of moment. It was just like, boom, we're working, man, we're off to the races. And it was just like, it just felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has the relationship with John Carter Cash been pretty similar and been pretty easy? And I guess has it been beneficial to your sort of your approach to making albums?
Yeah, man, like working with John's cool because he just wants me to be me. He's not like one of these producers who wants to put their own like stamp on it or anything. I think he's just trying to get the best out of me. And I think hiring people like Jerry and Sam and Dennis and Fred, and when you have a band like that, I think, like I said, you don't want to be the weak link. You want to be the guy that's like driving it all. And so I think he knew that I would want that challenge. And he probably also knew that like that would make me, get in tip top shape as far as like being well rehearsed and everything. So it's been cool. I don't ever feel like he's asking me to be somebody other than who I am. He just wants me to be like the best version of who I am. So yeah, it's been cool working with him.
Cool. What would you say, these last two projects that you've worked on, like what kind of place have you arrived at as they compare to this long body of work that you have kind of leading up to them? What's been the sort of trajectory that from where you started out with in Winston to where you finally landed? What do you think you've kind of been approaching?
I think it's like becoming myself. I mean, I feel like that's what I've constantly been trying to do all along with every record. You're trying to be more and more yourself. And I felt like it was happening big time with Better Hurry Up because we were recording live and I wasn't really hiding behind like any sort of process. It was a very unfiltered version of what you would see like from me at a show. And it just felt different recording that way because I'd kind of piecemealed the prior records together. And I just feel like it's a different process. And with Forsythia, the record we finished, it's kind of like even more closer to like, who I see myself as like in the long term, which is just a songwriter, and trying to highlight the songs with some roots instrumentation, that's kind of like the world I've always enjoyed. And, I pull from a lot of roots artists, and it's just kind of where I see myself fitting into the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I think that's where I was hoping that we could get to in the conversation was like, I want to talk about what roots is, and I want to talk about what Americana is, and like what those terms mean to you, to me, to the world. What is roots?
I mean, to me, roots, Americana, they're kind of the same thing to me in my head, or at least I feel like they should be. And I like to think of it as music that's influenced by like pre-rock and roll, So obviously the blues, early string band country, folk music, bluegrass, old time, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's like but it's interesting now because it's like I can't make a record that is so old timey, because like I've just I've heard more music than just those genres, so I'm influenced by things that aren't that. But I feel like at my core, roots music is there, you know, like it's like that's where I probably live in. And then I kind of, you know, maybe venture out of that here and there just to, you know, it's natural. It's like I'm not trying to cover up all the other things that I've heard in my, you know, existence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that I run into sometimes creating things, especially approaching things from a recording process is like in a way I feel like roots and Americana, I think the world that we both kind of live in it's somehow related. It's somehow in the family of like antiquity and the past and like culture and all this stuff in a world that's like so technologically focused that like sometimes there's just a lot of different options for how to express that sometimes it's confusing uh, it's confusing what's the right space for it or something, like sometimes it feels as, I don't know if you feel this way, but like creating something purely Americana or roots sometimes I feel like is so old fashioned, that like it doesn't capture the spirit of, I don't know. Like when I listen to Phoebe Bridgers shit, there's like a recording technique in her stuff that's so hard for me to even express what it is. And sometimes I'm not really sure how to navigate the sort of like the comfort of Americana and roots and stuff with like the modern approach to music and all the bells and whistles that has to go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like she sounds really modern to me.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would say about that. It's very vibey.
Yeah.
Which is, but the good thing about someone like her is like, to me, she's not relying on that vibe. It's there, but like she's a great songwriter. And I would say, I probably pull more influence into my songwriting than I do like music. So like I'm influenced by several songwriters outside of Americana roots, but I think like at my core, like it's always through that filter. That's what I'm using, like like a roots music filter, and then like I'm influenced by all these things outside of that. And that filters into the songwriting, but the actual music always will feel kind of more rootsy, kind of more country, because that's true to me. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
I'm a rural person, and I feel like I make rural music. And so you either do that or you don't. And like to me, even her being a good example, it's like it feels kind of glossy. It feels kind of like songs that could exist in a very big city landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And my songs just don't really feel that way, or my music doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I relate to that. And sometimes I mean, honestly, sometimes what do you think of genre in general? Like when you think of like roots and Americana, are you thinking of it as like a genre that you participate in? Or are you thinking of it more as just like, is it more just like the sounds that, like you were saying, like what you're comfortable with or what you think is true to you? Like, how do you, like, what role does it play? Is it a goal, do you think?
It's not a goal. I think the goal is to do what's natural to me in any given moment. And I think a lot of times it's just, that's what it is. It's like roots music to me. It feels really natural.
Yeah.
But, from a songwriting perspective, I think that, there's a lot of like Americana music where like, I always view Americana as like this thing that really focuses on the song. And I think a lot of folks have kind of missed the mark there, where it sounds good, but the song isn't really great. And that's a shame, because I really feel like, as a genre goes, that one should be held to a pretty high standard as far as songwriting is concerned. And there's high standards in songwriting across all genres. And I'm not sure that like, a lot of times people are like, ask me after a show, like, what do you call this kind of music? And they like can't figure it out. And that's fine with me, because like, like I don't care what anyone calls it, like what I do. And I just give the name roots or Americana just because like I'm trying to provide some sort of reference point for folks who are like, well, what is this? And it's like, if I say country, they're gonna think I'm, awful, whatever's on the radio country, and and so it's like, and if I say I'm blues, like, they're not really gonna get that either. So like it's like roots, I feel like maybe is the blending of country and blues, and it's, I guess that's where in gospel as well, and it's kind of like, I don't know. I think that I exist more in that world than any other world.
Yeah, man. I same exact experience, really. And I remember when I was 19 or so, or probably until I was like 25, I really felt as though I was kind of at war with the concept of genre. Like I really wanted it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing a thing with WFDD once. I've probably told you about this already, but during a Q&A afterward, someone asked me exactly that, like in front of the audience. Like, this isn't, it's got, I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's got hints of this genre or that genre, but it's not specifically one thing. Like, what is it that you do? And I kind of answered in a bit of a snarky way that reflected, I guess, my combat with genre as a concept. And I think for me, it's because I have tried to avoid its influence on the things that I create, Like, I don't want to go into a recording project thinking of it as like, if I'm going to make a roots album, if I'm going to make an Americana album, then I need to know the rules to that game and make sure that I don't break the rules.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
There are no rules.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I view making records. And really, when I talk about genre, it's mostly for other people.
Exactly.
It's not really for me. It's kind of like I'll talk about, genre in a way where I'm really trying to give other folks a reference point to what I'm doing. But like what I'm doing, like I mean, I hear everything in it, I don't just hear this one, like, because I'm listening to jazz and reggae and soul music and country and blues and, whatever else, and so, like I said, I just feel more comfortable like in a roots kind of setting, my voice and my writing. But yeah, I think genre is kind of more for like other people than it is for me.
Yeah. And record stores.
Yeah, record stores or labels or radio stations or whatever, and but I try not to get too caught up in it because I do feel like music can be anything you want it to, and it's when you start putting rules on yourself as an artist, I just feel like that's kind of detrimental to your growth. And so I kind of just view it as like, we'll describe it one way for other people and then I describe it to myself.
I feel the same way too about the rules thing. Like it's too limiting, man. I think, at least for me, I mean, I guess there are people out there who their whole thing is like, I want to make something that is intentionally going to break into this radio market or something like that. But as songwriters, I do think it's notoriously the case for songwriters that like the focus is just on create the thing you're going to create and let the chips fall where they will.
Yeah, figure it out afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, one could probably make the argument that you'd have a lot easier of a time being like, I am a pop artist, market me to pop fans.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. To me, it seems a little easier, but I do feel like maybe it's limiting in a lot of ways. Like, I just never want to back myself into a corner to where I can't go make whatever kind of record I want to make on any given day, even if it feels like a little out of left field for me as an artist. Like, I still want the ability to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I've always tried to like not really back myself into a corner.
Yeah, I think that's the way to be. So what do you think the term folk didn't come up? Like, what do you think of the term folk and what does it bring to mind, I guess, for you?
Oh, I did say folk. Because,
did you?
Yeah, because it's folk is interesting because, you've got folk and then you've got country folk and you got like folky blues and like, I think folk is probably like the storytelling aspect of it. That's kind of how I view folk music. It's like it better be good. The song better be good. If you're a folk artist, if you're just you and your guitar, like it better be a damn good song to keep my interest. And but yeah, I think folk music is like that's probably what I am, like at the core, because I'm just, I always write songs, just me, just a guitar, and so that's my process. But then I maybe dress it up in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I too kind of think of folk in like, in musical terms. It seems to mean something like single person. And I think that's what it means in cultural terms in a lot of ways, or everyman kind of, like regular guy, everyman kind of approach.
Plain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess in art, in fine, like, in visual art, I guess it means something else. Sometimes it means like rustic, or I guess still plain, still
Yeah.
like achievable by the average person.
Exactly.
In some kind of way.
And I kind of think of it as like you're using the tools that you have access to create the highest art of your ability. That's kind of how I view folk art or folk music. When you see a lot of folk art, you're seeing like someone found a car hood and then they decided to paint this awesome painting on this car hood because that's what was available to them in that moment, and they were able to make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And I kind of view that as folk music too. It's kind of like, I'm able to take my cheap guitar and sit down on a sofa and create something out of thin air. And I always just feel really connected to that because like, that what you're working on is like essentially coming from within.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think this thing is that's like, a couple of artists come to mind, like Sturgill or like Tyler Childers, who care a lot about being affiliated with the word country, and I think I kind of got that one time that I've told you about where I got to, like, for some odd reason, interview Chris Stapleton for the Relish that time. That was like strange, and it was back when he was doing small clubs, so it was just like a fortunate little thing. He felt this like need to defend the term country and like simplify it down to country music is made by country people and it doesn't matter what it sounds like. And it does, like, I know that he didn't come out and say, but he basically was saying, I know that Nashville is changing and that like the sounds are different and that it's very glamorous, but it's still country. Whereas Tyler Childers and Sturgill Simpson, I guess of recent years have been, kind of at odds with Nashville for not really accepting their brand of country as country. There's this question of like, what is accepted in this term anymore? What do you make of that? Like, being somebody who works in Nashville and is connected to Nashville, like, what do you make of the sacredness of this idea of the term country?
Well, I mean, for me, it's like I'm looking at that situation and I'm thinking Chris Stapleton, he has a lot more to lose because people are cutting his songs in the country music genre of today, modern country. So he's having cuts on the radio. So I get what he's trying to say. Like, he can be part of that world. And then whereas no one's cutting a Sturgill Simpson or a Tyler Childers song in modern country. So I get why they would feel more on the outside of that world. And then there's some people who probably, like a Jason Isbell, where it's like he has had people cut his songs in modern country, but I think he kind of more views himself, probably primarily as a Americana artist, but maybe a rock and roll artist as well. I can't speak for him, but so I don't know. I think everyone's just trying to find the place where they fit, and I think it's a little. I'd be lying if I said I had faith in modern country, like they were going to make good decisions and play good songs on the radio. I've just been let down too many years in a row by what they're doing. And so, I'm sure I identify more along the lines of Sturgill or Tyler or whoever else, Margot Price or Nikki Lane or any like, artists who are country tinged but never going to be played on country radio because they're probably too outspoken just across the board. And so and I just think that they make better music than what's happening on modern country, so maybe it's not an association that they need to have. So that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, I got to take it. It's usually best if I take the conversation in a weird direction when it comes to mine.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to do. there's this comedian who I love who described comedy once as like as the religion of comedy. He was like, basically like my life has been saved by being participating in the religion of comedy. And as we were talking about that sort of Nashville thing, and it started to occur to me, like I could imagine like country music being the term like a term like Christianity, and then like all these little like Americana and folk and all this stuff that might be underneath it being like Baptist and Pentecostal and all this.
Right. Different sects.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the idea of different mediums of art being almost like religions?
Well, I think you said it, he said comedy saved him, and I think, if a painter paints because they were saved by painting, I think ultimately their work's going to outshine somebody who's just painting to just pass the time or whatever. And, for me, like I can listen to 30 seconds of a song and know whether or not this person means it. And if they don't mean it, I'm out. Like I just don't have time. I mean, there's too many great songwriters out there who do mean it, and you can hear that in the 30 seconds and just be like, oh man, that like they've dedicated their life to this thing. And so, yeah, man, it's interesting, but yeah, I think music can save people. I think almost anything can save people if you're passionate about it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think that drawing your attention to sincerity was interesting because, like, that's too what comes to mind with people of traditional religions. Like, are they sincere in their beliefs? Like, do they want it to be good? Are they doing it for this or that? Are they doing it for appearances or whatever? But
yeah,
in any action, in any kind of anything that defines forward movement and action that requires sincerity on your part, I guess I could see actually. I was asking the question almost a little bit sarcastically at first, but just as you started talking about it, it started to make more sense, the similarities it might actually have with something like the meditative, intentional nature of a religion as it relates to behavior.
And really, it's like the purity of it, right? It's like, what am I writing songs for? Am I writing songs that, help me get through my life? Yes. And I think not everyone can say that, probably. It's like some people are just writing songs to just, I don't know why you would want to put yourself through writing a song if it wasn't like, very sincere.
Yeah.
Like, cause songwriting is painful, man. So like, I can't imagine putting myself through this if I didn't come out on the other side of it, where it's like, oh, but this is also really meaningful and it's helping me in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine going to church every Sunday morning and every Wednesday night and not following the teachings of Christ. It's sort of like, well, you're kind of wasting your time if you're not doing that,
Yeah.
So I kind of just view that as, it's sort of like a practice what you preach sort of thing,
100%. I mean, I feel like that's like what that's what we tend to be drawn to in other people, regardless of whatever. Like we all like different movies, different singers and musicians, and we could look at a preacher and notice whether he was charismatic or sincere or whatever. Just in entrepreneurs, like you just run into people that if they give off that vibe of really being invested in what they're doing and like being passionate about it, it kind of doesn't matter what the medium is, as long as like the outcome is good and the sincerity is there. It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're not like hurting anyone or doing anything like
like
super
that,
messed up. But like, yeah, I mean, like it's weird. A lot of people like ask me, they'll try to get me to like talk trash on certain genres or whatever. But like, even with like a band like ICP, it's like I see their place in this world, and they've provided this like safe haven for a lot of folks who didn't feel like they really fit in anywhere. And in that way, like I'm like, well, then they're serving their purpose, and they're like providing this space for people who didn't have a space before. So it's like in a lot of ways, it's like, how can I trash that? That's like a beautiful scenario, and like not everybody does that. And so you kind of got to look at like folks like that, and you're just like, all right, well, like, you're serving your purpose, and I think that's really cool.
I agree wholeheartedly with
Yeah.
that. Um, so another question that comes to mind that forgive me if I think I can ask this because you've been pretty outward about it or like whatever. So if you don't want to talk about it, just say so and we won't. But um, another thing that we have in common, I guess, was just like an experience with therapy and stuff. Is that something that you'd be willing to like talk about a little
Sure.
bit?
Yeah.
So that was a recent thing for you, right?
Yeah, pretty recent. I was probably pretty against therapy, but maybe more against the idea of like willingness to change and try to become somebody, more than myself. And I think that's what therapy's kind of like helped me with,
Mm.
is like, it's just kind of broken down just some barriers for me that yeah, it's just been really helpful. It's like I think I'm like 8 months into it now, something like that. And yeah, had a session yesterday. It was awesome.
What do you think it's been? I mean, can you? I'm not trying to ask about your private life or whatever, but
Sure.
still connected to all this shit that we've been talking about, like what it means to be an artist, what it means to be devoted to positive things in life and creativity and different things. Maybe we can just start with um, maybe going a little deeper on what you just said, like the reservation about it and not really wanting to go into that space where you're like analyzing yourself necessarily from that angle. What do you think made you not want to?
Um, I think that there's a big part of me that is rigid and like determined. And that goes all the way back to, like when you're like a kid, like you're, 12, 13, 14. And especially if you're an artist of any kind and you start telling people like, yeah, I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. And it's like, you're going to unfortunately be met with a lot of people kind of stomping on those dreams. And so I think that I developed kind of like a rigidness about that where it was like, if somebody, I'm going to prove them wrong or whatever. And so I think that I was like, that was probably like the part of me that was like really against therapy, because I was kind of like, well, I don't need the help, like I've never had the help. I can do this myself. I'm like, I'll put in the work. And, therapy is really cool because like, it's not anything what I had thought that it was. It's more, it's more of just a mirror. And then you get to really see like all the different parts of you, all the different sides of you, and like why are they the way that they are, and why did I develop a rigidness at such a early age? And it was just because you're trying to guard your heart, as a kid. And so yeah, I think that was probably the reason I didn't want to go. And it's probably the thing that I'm working on most in therapy, is like breaking down that rigidness and realizing that it's like, it's a tool that was really beneficial for me rather than something to be ashamed about. And so, but like with any tool, it's like if you use it constantly for a decade, like it's going to feel worn out and exhausted. So it's like something we were talking about yesterday was like, knowing how to set that tool aside and just be like, you served your purpose. I'm a different person now than I was when I first picked you up. And now my relationship with that rigidness needs to develop.
Man, yeah. I reached a point in my experience with therapy where that was a similar exercise to what I was doing. At least that part where you have to communicate with your thing, with whatever it is that is like got you gripped, and trying to convince it to let you be free.
Yeah.
And man, that's a great place to be, though, even though it can be really painful and really challenging.
It's super hard, man. It's super hard to put that tool down because it has served you or me so well. in a way that like it definitely made me keep going in times where had I not had that tool, I wouldn't have been, as focused. Um, but I think the problem is you start developing like serious trust issues with anyone, whether it's a promoter or a label or a booking agent or a manager or whoever. It's like you've got to break down those walls because there are people who just want to help and they want your vision to be the thing that is getting pushed forward, and they don't want you to change. Like I was saying with John Carter, it's like I didn't need to use that tool in that situation because John wanted me to be myself in the studio. Whereas, I'm sure some producers come in and they like want you to be this version that they have in mind of like what they think you should be. And in that moment, that's when that tool, I use it big time because I'm like, no, I'm going to be myself because, I got into this because I wanted to fully be myself. And I knew that I couldn't do that working at a pizza joint. Like I just knew that that was like a block. It was a barrier for me. And so I had to get rid of that. And also, I think over time you start learning, self-worth, and you surround yourself with people who will support you in that. And if they don't support you in that, unfortunately, some of those friendships or drinking buddies or whatever, it's like they start to fall by the wayside. And then that's painful. That's a painful process. And I've went through it with several people. But I think that, at the end of the day, it's your life and it's your goals and what would serve you best. And so, surrounding yourself with people who are supportive of that, but who will also call you on something, like, I mean, it's a perfect example. Like my wife, like she's going to tell me when I'm like messing up, like she's going to tell me, like, hey, you got to like focus, you got to do this different or whatever. And it's like, I trust her and I trust that she wants what's best. And so I got to seriously look at that and look at that opinion and say like, hey, there's some truth to this. And like, I need to change. And so, I think it's just surrounding yourself with people that you trust.
Yeah, man. What a dark thing about the music world and stuff is sometimes when I first got into therapy, one of my biggest fears was that if I became healthier, I would be less creative, or that I would be less motivated to be creative. And I think I believed that like all these horrible feelings that I would have sometimes and all these like horrible thoughts about myself or whatever that I can have, that like motivated me to create something beautiful and like share it with people and try to do something significant with myself. And I was horrified at the idea that if I got healthy, I could lose that. I heard Jim Carrey talk about that too in that Jim and Andy movie.
Yeah.
And he's like, it can be. I don't think I think of it as an industry problem, like that the industry wants you to be sick, like there's some kind of bad conspiracy there. But I think it's in art, man. I think like people also look at other artists and they kind of say there's a certain group of people who look at like sad art, really challenging art, really like gritty art, and they see what they want to see, which is that same problem, I think, in them in a lot of ways. Problems with sobriety, problems with like addiction and stuff, problems with like my life is pointless and shit like that.
Right.
And then there's also those other people that they gravitate more toward art that is just super positive and stuff. Did any of those thoughts about like, because you do make art that's pretty, you make songs that are pretty from an emotionally challenged place, and you also have had your experiences with getting sober and like getting healthier. Was that part of was that same fear that I had? Did that enter into your mind when you were going into it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially with quitting drinking for me was like, I mean, what we're really talking about though is like a shift in identity, and I think that was a big part of when I quit drinking. I think the hardest part was like that was such a big part of my identity, you know, like I just hung out in bars, you know, till last call, you know, like that was like such a huge part of my life. And then to take that away and then, you know, realizing like, oh man, that was just like, that wasn't even really a part of my like actual self, you know, that wasn't, and so it's like you're trying to like relearn like who you are without that thing. And I think, you know, that was a real painful process for me because that is when I lost a lot of like friends. And so I probably viewed therapy as a similar thing, which was like, if I go do this, it's going to change the makeup of what I consider my identity. And so, yeah, it's a huge process, and you have to be willing to like go where it takes you, and you kind of have to like, you know, like submit to it. You know, it's like you're kind of like laying yourself out and like just being like, all right, like what am I now? What am I now without, you know, what am I now without drinking? Or like what am I now with therapy? And like, you know, how do people view that? And you know, will they like me? You know, will they like this new version of me? Will they accept this new version of me? And I think that like that's like a terrible thought process, because I think anybody who, um, you know, cares about you whatsoever, they're going to like support you in whatever kind of identity you take, you know, they have to just be, it's not up to them, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's so often in life where it's like, people care about, you know, this or that, and they have big opinions about this or that, and like rarely does it actually affect them. It's more about the person who they're placing judgment on, you know.
100%.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, that is a brutal truth in life, is that like sometimes the sad story is that like what people want is a companion to like torture themselves with or whatever, to like not be the best they can be with. So they want to surround themselves with people who are not going to like elevate beyond that certain point. I mean, like, you know, there's plenty of examples of people just seeing other people as objects that either make them, not plenty of examples, I said that wrong, but the truth about people is that a lot of the times we see each other as objects that either make you feel good or bad about yourself. And the people who want to become healthy sometimes make other people feel bad about themselves, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of it. And you know, it's like a weird experience where, you know, a lot of my fans know that I don't drink. And you know, sometimes after a show, I'll talk to someone at the merch table, and you know, they're out, they're having a good time, and you know, they got a good buzz going on, and they feel the need to like apologize to me, where I don't need an apology from anyone, you know, like never have I once thought like quitting drinking made me superior to anyone who has not done that. That's not part of my process. What I have thought is it made me a better person. It made, you know, it gave me clarity to see what I actually needed to work on. And so whenever someone's apologizing to me, I always feel really awkward, because I'm like, you're like, you have your own path. Like maybe you're not ready to quit drinking, or maybe you don't need to quit drinking. Maybe you're just out having a good time, and that's all it is. And like, that wasn't all that it was with me. And so I knew that I had to make a change there if I wanted to, you know, hold on to the relationships that I felt were worth holding on to.
Sparing some details, you understand? Like, I'm not asking you to tell everything about your life, but maybe as it relates to creativity or something. What do you think quitting drinking, like what did it open up for you? Like what did it do when you quit drinking?
Made my standards higher.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's the biggest change. It was like, because like, okay, so why are you an addict? You know, like what are you running from? Why are you running to drinking? Like what was the thing? And it's like, for me, it was always like, I just scared of like, I'm not good enough. Like I'm not a good enough songwriter, or like I don't have what it takes to do this long term, and this is like the dream that I've sunken my teeth into. And so like, and I feel like I was constantly kind of like running from that insecurity, and that I was trying to mask it and tap into my ego and feel confident within that. And I just don't know that that works long term. I think it's like a Band-Aid you can put on it. But I think like quitting drinking for me, like it gave me the clarity to see like, man, I have a lot I can work on, and there's I can get way better at my craft. And I don't think that's something I necessarily like put in the forefront of who I was. I think that I just kind of was like, I have a natural knack for writing songs. It comes really easy at the time, you know. But sometimes I wonder if it came that easy because my standards weren't high enough. And because songwriting now is a lot harder for me. And I think that, the older you get, the higher your standards get. You're pulling from this well of creativity your entire life, and you're trying not to tread the same ground. All of those things, I think, as time goes on, it just makes songs, for me, they're harder to come by. And I'll get one occasionally, and when I do, I'm like, thank the heavens, it feels really good to finish a song now. I mean, it always has, but I think that now I like, I'm a little bit more reverent towards the process, and like just knowing that, and just like having the clarity to just know like when something isn't good, just being like, wait a minute, like I can do better. Like I know I can do better. I have done better. Let's work on this. This isn't done till it's really done, so all that kind of thing.
That is a very cool shift and makes some sense. I mean, I had read about like when Tom Waits got sober, and it was a similar thing. I think, and he just reached a new level of what his creative objectives were and what his creative identity was throughout that process. From what I understand, that was like a pivotal moment when he became like the Tom Waits that we maybe know more of now. And I've seen that in other artists too, and it makes sense that like I guess when you decide I'm not going to accept this crutch thing, I guess it makes some sense that you're sort of what you feel like you're capable of and what you feel like your standards are for how you're going to live and all that stuff rise. And I noticed recently when you were like telling me about a song that you had adapted more recently, the words that you had adapted, it seemed like they had a purpose behind them, that like you didn't identify with the way you used to see yourself anymore, like this sadness, this patheticness, I guess, that I think that's the word you used, that you just didn't identify with looking at yourself that way anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't think it's true. It's like when I view like what I've gone through and the whole journey. Like if I can step back and really view it, it's like it's not this pathetic thing. It's like this very driven, the need to improve, the need to learn. To me, and it feels like something that just goes on forever. Like there's no end to learning. There's no end to improving. It's just like, and I think that, yeah, I just feel like the standards are just constantly being raised, and it's painful, but it's like it's also pushing me to become a better writer, or at the very least, a more vulnerable, a more raw writer, a more connected, just all those things that you're striving for. I just feel like they're becoming more clear.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think it's inspiring, honestly. I've like, because I'm not a, I don't have a problem in my life where I notice that alcohol has an effect on me, but sometimes has an addictive necessarily, that I have an addictive relationship with it. But I am intrigued by people who seem to gain so much from sobriety itself. And you hear more and more people talking about this, about the fact that we're just kind of waking up to the brute notion that alcohol is just poison for us and that it's not necessary for our well-being by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of like the fabric of the world, right? You know, like you can't watch any sports game without seeing like 18 beer commercials or whatever, or liquor commercials. And it's like, enjoy responsibly. And like, yeah, I guess that works for like some people, but like, enjoy responsibly for me, that didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, I became an addict, and I still view myself as that. You know, like I think there's a really like a crazy misconception that you know, once someone quits drinking, like then they're good, you know. And like to me, I think recovery is like it's a long lasting thing. I don't think there's like I still view myself as in recovery, and I haven't drank in like over 7 years, but I still want to. You know, it's like I never stop wanting to get drunk. I want to get drunk, you know, like, but like I think that like people are scared to talk about that because it's a vulnerable thing, and it's like, and like I think that a lot of people would view that as like, why do you want to get drunk? Like your life's so much better without that, and it's like, well, yeah, but like I'm still, you know, I'm still a person. I still have feelings, and I still feel drawn to that. You know, whether I act on those, you know, feelings or you know that's a whole other thing. But like I think it's okay to still say like, you know, like yeah, I had a lot of fun getting drunk. Like it was a lot of fun, and it was also pretty miserable, and you know, and it cost me a lot too. So. But I wouldn't take any of it back, you know? Like I wouldn't change anything because I feel like everything kind of leads you to the next thing. And you know, I think had I not taken it as far as I took it, then I wouldn't be where I'm at now the other way. And so yeah, I think recovery is just like a lifelong process, and I think the sooner that the general public can just get that through their head and just be cool with it and like be normal about it, I think the better. I think there's just such a stigma still around like, oh, you know, it's like what people apologizing to me at the merch table. It's like, man, don't apologize to me. Like I'm doing my thing. I hope you're doing your thing, and I hope that you can figure out what's best for you. And that's you know, that's where I come from, like with it all.
Yeah. Has it helped you creatively too? Aside from just as an entrepreneur, as a person that's a healthy person, but has your approach to songwriting benefited from having from being sober?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, like you just kind of know what's not good, you know, or at least for me, because you know that was such a big part of my life. That I mean, of course, my judgment was clouded, you know, about the work that I was, you know, participating in. So yeah, it's really just the clarity of it. Just like seeing like things for what they are. And yeah, I think it's made a huge difference in my writing and what I'm striving for, and just goals in general, you know. Just there's no way I would have ever gone to therapy had I still been drinking. You know, it was like a very staggered kind of life process, you know, like quitting drinking, and then I incorporated like hiking, and that was really good for just my mental health and my soul. And so, you know, it's like you're just trying, you know, I constantly, you know, I maybe complain to my wife where I'm like, why do I have to quit drinking, go hiking every day, like go to therapy just to feel normal? Like I just want to feel normal. And it's like, unfortunately, I just deal with depression and anxiety. And it's like, you know, I tried to use drinking to cover that up, and it worked for a while, but then that just like made it worse ultimately. And so now I'm trying to figure out all these new ways that are more healthy versions of that to like you know, not eliminate depression and anxiety, because I don't believe that to be true. I think it's something I'll probably deal with for my whole life, and I've just kind of like, I know what works, you know, typically to help that. But then there's some times where it's like, man, I got everything going for me, like you know, like a lot of people are saying yes, you know, like I've got all these opportunities coming up. I'm making the best record I've ever made. You know, I'm in a happy marriage. I'm hiking. I'm going to therapy. And then sometimes like depression doesn't care. It doesn't care about any of that stuff. And that's how you know that it's real. I think it's like when you're doing everything you know to do to alleviate that, and it's still there. It's like at some point you just have to say, like, this isn't me. Like, this is something else. It's a disease, and you know, I'm just trying to figure out how to work around that disease.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been hiking with you, and you hiked me under the table.
Well, I love it, man. Being out in the woods, because there's something ancient about it, right? There's like, like when I'm hiking through the woods, I think about all the generations of, my family that came before me and how that's similar to their process. They didn't have a phone in their hands. They didn't have, a lot of today's problems weren't presenting themselves to them at the time, and so I think I use hiking as something to relate to prior generations, and like also just kind of when you're in the woods, and especially if you're by yourself, I mean, you're stripped down to nothing there. It's like you're alone with your thoughts, and you're alone with a world that just like it's not like when I'm in the woods and I'm seeing like wild animals, I'm like, oh man, it's so cool that they're not like having to deal with COVID, like it's cool. Like I like, it's like, and it's cool how curious animals are, and how like for the most part they're like really chill, and then they only become dangerous if provoked. And I just feel like most animals are misunderstood in that way. And I connect with that. So, I feel like I'm pretty easygoing guy unless like somebody says some bullshit to me, and then I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm gonna have to fight back on that. And so, I mean, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I think before we started talking, I had been tempted to talk because I don't really ever bring up COVID very much, but
Yeah.
Probably reasonable to talk about it on occasion. And like you're somebody, you really, I mean, you had a whole record ready to go.
Yeah.
And COVID totally fucked that plan up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we, the last record came out April 3rd, 2020. And my first day of 150 dates was declared a world pandemic that day when I was supposed to start a tour in Little Rock. And, yeah, I mean, it kind of wrecked my whole life, honestly. And just because, a lot of people don't view it this way, but like this is my small business. And, I've got all my money sunk into, manufacturing the records and, the press and the radio and all the other things. And that tour is where you go and you recoup that money for your small business. And for me, it just prevented me from being able to work. And honestly, it's still affecting me maybe in a different way. I think a lot of people who never lost their job probably feel like the pandemic's over. But I think people who are still trying to work in this space, it's very much not over.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why the perception is that like, well, it's over. Like the Rolling Stones went on tour last summer, so it's good. But like, I think people in small venues, the Rolling Stones can require a vaccine mandate at their shows, and hey, if they lose half their crowd, they're still going to sell out stadiums because they're the Rolling Stones. If I lose half my crowd over a vaccine mandate, then that's a big hit on me. So, I think everyone's trying to navigate it the best they know how, and like, I think everyone's just wanting things to get back to somewhat normal and do it as safely as possible. And I'm just hoping that as time goes on, it becomes less and less of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are really starting to get eager for it now, and the problem seems to be that the methodologies for how we deal with this, it seems like I don't even know what to think anymore, man. Like, you just see shit on the news, and you're like, is that the majority of people? Do the majority of people want to like start requiring masks permanently everywhere, or do the majority of people want to gather in the streets and say no more mandates, or the majority of people like me who are just kind of like, they take COVID seriously, but also they are trying to figure out how we continue to exist economically and stuff. And it's like, I don't know, man. I feel confused by it all because I don't see what direction we're actually going to go in, I guess, because it's not clear. Like, there's not one direction that everybody's feeling like we need to necessarily go in, other than it'd be nice if it was all over.
Yeah. I don't even know if we'd agree on that, because I'm sure some people are getting ultra rich off
Really
of this.
rich, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's black and white. I think there's, so like with anything, it's just a ton of gray area. And, I think I probably have some false hope in humanity. I always try to think the best in people, but I don't know that that's necessarily always true. And so, yeah, I just, it would be cool to get back to normal. I'm doing everything that I can in my power, to make that real. And I can't control everyone, and that's just going to have to be how it is. It's like you're not changing anybody's mind at this point. We're like 2+ years into it. I don't think that anyone's having like an awakening unless maybe they lose a family member or it hits home in a big way for them. But like I said, like for me, I lost my job. And so when you lose your job, and, I think everyone would be a lot more sympathetic to wearing masks indoors if, their livelihood depended on that. And I think until people can kind of look outside themselves and say like, hey, like maybe it isn't all about me. Maybe it's like like as a collective, we need to address how to move forward through this. I think as soon as, if we could get to that place, I think we'd be in better shape.
Yeah, I'm sure those people, somebody who's on the other side of the mask stance, then I'm sure they would look at you and say, I want your shows to go on without masks so that everybody can be there. And, so it's like, fortunately, I think everybody wants art to exist on the other side of this thing, but it's just like, well, who has the right? There's very different approaches to how we sustain art through this time, and they don't coexist with each other. And so it's hard to decide who gets precedence,
And I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I don't know that I think that everyone wants art to be a part of the world.
Really?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a good portion of society that could care less, really.
I do feel that way lately. That is part of the reason I started this podcast talking to artists, is because I do feel as though people have lost touch with the arts in a major way, like in a detrimental way.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of do fuck with that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just been like, it's like they've just been desensitized to it all. Like, it's weird to me that you can pull out your phone and listen to any record you've ever wanted to hear, all at once. Because when I was coming up, it wasn't like that. It was like, if I heard about Townes Van Zandt, I had to go to the 3 record stores I knew that could maybe have that, and then they didn't, and then they had to import it from the Netherlands, and like I had to wait 3 weeks, and then when I finally heard it, even if I didn't like it upon first listen, I was like dedicated to like listening to that because it took me 3 weeks to get it. Of course, I love Townes immediately, but I'm just saying, like, in general, I just think that art isn't as appreciated in general because it's so accessible. And I think, when you have a guy with an acoustic guitar in the corner of every bar that no one cares about and they're singing cover songs, it's like, what kind of message are we sending to artists who are trying to do it for real? Probably not a good message. Kind of a message like, hey, the world's probably not going to care about you for a really long time, and you can do it all right, and hopefully they'll start to care after a while. But for me, I just place such a huge importance on art, like all kinds, like all mediums, because I think that those are the thinkers, and I think that artists like kind of save the world from going mad.
Yeah, I do too. I'm really glad you said that last part. there's so many ways we could talk about this. I mean, on one hand, I want to say this. On one hand, I want to say there's that there's this space between art and creativity. And what's one thing that's frustrating about the modern world is that there's more creativity being expressed than I think ever, because so many people have the same tools to express their creativity. But it is becoming increasingly hard to distinguish between just impulsive creativity and like what probably most of us would look at as works of art. And works of art, I mean, it's hard to put a universal definition on that and say this is what we all agree this is, because that's an ongoing, that's been a conversation for forever. Like, how do you define art? How do you define beauty and all this stuff? But definitely, as far as like art being something that requires time and devotion and seriousness, craft, that has been really gutted. And now, like with the way that not just we consume music, but the way that we consume media. I mean, like TikTok and shit. These things are like majorly impacting the way that they're actually serious. Like, there's studies coming out regularly about how much our attention span has been impacted by these things, and how addicted that so many people are to these things, and the degree to which it's taken away from people's ability to like really dedicate and allow their attention to be on a piece of art or a piece of music for an extended period of time. So there's that like huge problem. And then on the other side, you said, like art helps keep the world from going mad. I mean, my biggest beef is I don't really mind that I'm changing my I'm trying my best to develop and mature my attitude about social media and accept that it's here and that it will be here, and that that the landscape of the value of media is different. But honestly, what worries me a lot more is seeing the popular ideas of the current day infiltrating humanity to the degree that it's like infiltrating the arts. And what I mean is basically somebody's willingness to allow their identity to reflect the popular like political ideology is starting to dictate the way that they perceive art. That bothers me a lot, because it's like people are not allowing art to exist without going through that filter. And I think that is more damaging to what artistic expression is than anything else that's going on in our popular culture right now.
Yeah, or like the concept of like going viral, and like what does that mean? I'm never gonna do that, because I'm really disinterested in it, and it's like anybody that goes through that process, it's like now recapture it. They're never gonna recapture it.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're making long-lasting art, you need to make like decisions to make that long-lasting art. And I think a lot of times, if you're just trying to get like famous overnight, like anyone can be outrageous or say the worst thing ever and get famous overnight. And it's like, but yeah, you're famous for kind of all the wrong reasons. Like, folks kind of are laughing at you,
Yeah.
And I think maybe if that's enough for some people, like, okay, I guess, but I don't understand it. But like, I think I'm only really interested in people that are like, working on their craft for years and years and years, and it's just more impressive to me.
That's happening so much now. Just like and it's happening a lot in music that I didn't really see that coming a few years ago. But like, yeah, the viral video thing, and how now it seems like a business model to make a really embarrassingly bad Instagram, like YouTube video or TikTok sort of presentation of music,
Mm-hmm.
and that can make people fucking rich now.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of just don't think that that's the world I live in, because like to me social media is like it's just not real. It's not like real life. Like like it doesn't it's weird to call it social media because I don't really think that's what it is. It's not really social. More than anything it's like very isolating,
Mm-hmm.
and so like I'm just pretty put off by the whole thing, you know? And so I try to just like limit my interaction with it. And, I kind of view it as like this tool that I can use in my career. But I never view it as like this thing that I'm going to base my whole career off of.
Yeah. That's a tricky thing because like so many people feel like that is what they base it off of, which I'm glad to hear that that's not your attitude. But I mean, a lot of people now, it feels like they're shifting to this domain that's like, well, my whole business model, my whole way of making art is to do it, to post it on TikTok or to post it on, and no, I shouldn't say that. There are occasions where social media is used to signal to people what they should do artistically because they use that as like, well, TikTok is telling me that this appeals to people, so that's what I'll do. And that seems a bit fucking like a nightmare to me, you know?
Yeah.
As a
Because if you're
creator, you know?
dedicating that much time to TikTok, how much are you dedicating to your craft? I think it's a good question to ask, and it's something that I think about often. Like if I'm on social media, like I'm not working on my ultimate goal, which is, writing the best song I could ever write,
Yeah.
it's like, what am I working on at that point? You know, Followers or like, and it's also a weird thing where it's like, just because someone follows you on, like, if someone follows me on Instagram, that doesn't even mean that they like my music or have even ever clicked play on my music or
Yeah.
anything like that. And so I got to like look at that for what it is, which is that's not the real world. It's not the world that I actually exist in. World that I actually exist in are like meeting people at my shows who came there to hear my songs. They don't want to just see selfies or whatever, like it's like I said, it doesn't feel like real life to me, and it doesn't feel very social to me. It just feels like a thing that exists now.
I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I hope you maintain that. And that's like, I feel like I need to get more in that place because I think it's really bothering me like how all the like the pressure that I feel from all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I guess I was hinting at too is like another part of this whole trap is like what as we're seeing what spreads on these things is not depth and sincerity and realness. What seems to be spreading in these realms, particularly the more video focused ones like TikTok and now at what Instagram is starting to become, is kind of bullshit. Is kind of like almost pathology toward like something irrational. And I guess Twitter participates in this too, but I don't know, man. I'm I do I get really wigged out and concerned with ideology like spreading too rampantly through society, and that's something that I do feel like is happening quite a lot. And yeah, so going back to it, for me, I mean, life life has been confusing at times, and like music has been a way that I have sorted through my state of mind. And the things that I've created so far usually have been kind of examples of places that I've landed, and that's the art that I've often I don't know what their motivations were, but like art that has usually spoken to me was art that challenged where I was and made like provoked me into thinking about new things or pulled me into new realms of beauty that I wasn't maybe totally aware of. And I think by feeding into like popular patterns on social medias, platforms and stuff, um, it seems like the world is missing all these opportunities to like be provoked by art and to like go to new places of thinking instead of like reinforcing these paths that they're already on. And I worry about it, man, because I think that we're seeing a lot of examples of true visionaries being eaten up by this and like basically the public turning on people who speak freely or who think freely. And that I feel like for me as an artist, I don't know where to land in all that, whether I like take on the fucking role of trying to speak freely or if I just put my head down and sort of like accept that there are people who are in the position to like fight that fight, and I just have to watch it from a distance because it's a bit intimidating to want to participate in it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I'm not, I don't, my interactions with the internet have nothing to do with like me arguing with people on the internet or anything like that, because like for me, like it's really just a self-preservation. It's like a mental health concern would be like, I'm just disinterested in like trying to prove a point or trying to persuade someone to feel a certain way because, you know, I don't think that has ever happened on the internet. I don't think that someone's got on the internet feeling and thinking about one way and then they see someone post something opposing their view and then they'll be like, you know what? I'm in on the other side now. I don't think that's happened. Maybe it's happened, but I don't think so.
I mean, and that isn't necessarily what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking more of like what it means to express yourself freely in the realm where it doesn't like you're going to say what you have to say regardless of whatever. And I'm usually a poetic writer that writes about like oak trees and shit. That's usually what I write about. But like on life lessons, I took that I went to a different realm because of what I was seeing happen ideologically among people. And having these conversations, I mean, there's things that I would love to bitch about right now in this conversation that I sort of have to like decide, well, what is better to like have everybody in my life give them the option to like realize that I'm not a member of this ideological movement that's going on, which I'm doing right now, I'm admitting right now, to express that I'm not a part of that ideological movement, or to not express who I really am and like get to reap the benefits of being somebody that I'm not.
Yeah. I don't know. I hear you. I just feel like, I just try to be myself.
Yeah.
And, people can take it or leave it. And I'm sure lots of people leave it. And, I don't know. Like, I never feel like I'm posting anything controversial, I guess. So,
yeah, all that to say,
so maybe I just haven't experienced that personally.
Yeah, I'll stop harping on this. I guess the last thing on this is just that I don't think my music tends to be controversial in that way either, and I think that's why I've started podcasting, because I have to have these conversations one way or another, and I don't think music is for that space. I think music does something else, but watching a lot of people apply their criteria of thought to stand-up comedians, and I fucking love stand-up comedians, and I think there's a real true kinship between music and stand-up comedy, and so I feel like I'm looking for my angle to contribute to the conversation in that way, because I'm not going to do it musically. I'm not going to write songs that act as essays, politically oriented essays. That's not what I write, but at least I can have conversations with individuals about like whatever shit that's going on. And like you said, hopefully, ultimately, all I want to do is put out a message to people. Art has a very significant impact, and I think particularly music has a very significant impact on the mind, and it can truly detach you from these like day-to-day bullshit things that make you feel fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And I want to put out a message that's like, I hope people start eventually to maybe question whether or not it's if this like thing that we're doing now, taking in media the way we are, if it's actually like superior to devoting your attention to somebody's artistic vision, because I don't think it is. And I hope that people start to care more about the well-being of the arts industries.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, It's interesting, even in the way that like I think about in my formative years, like when I'm 16 riding around in my car, like I maybe had 100 CDs, let's say 100. I have 100 records that I can dedicate my time to. And now I just feel like I'm so spread out because there's just always something new, and it's just kind of like trying to sort through all of it to find the things that like truly move you and, truly shape you. And so, and I believe that music can do that. I think it can move and shape you, and I think it can even change you um, in a pretty significant way, especially something like folk music where it's like, okay, here, these are life lessons that you're learning through these songs, and so it's interesting now because you don't just have 100 records where you can dedicate all your time to these 100. It's like you're spread way more thin.
Yeah.
And so you're not dedicating the time that you probably need to dedicate to some of these records, where like some of my favorite stuff is like upon first listen, my interest was piqued, but maybe it wasn't like my favorite thing in the world. And then it slowly became that because I was willing to spend more time with it and develop my thoughts around it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's spot on. And I think we've pretty much got where we ought to with this conversation. I don't want to like drag it on too long. I'm surprised. I didn't know we were going to talk about all this stuff. I thought we were going to talk a lot more about your recording project at the Cash Cabin and everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm really glad that we got to this place. I feel like this was not more interesting, but it was really cool to just hear your thoughts about, especially about therapy and like going into that space. So anyway, we'll call it a day for now, but we'll talk more about your Cash Cabin experience sometime. But anyway, thank you for coming to do this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I guess that's it. So, all right.